My name is Eleanor, and I'm 72 years old. And the cruelest words I ever heard came from my own grandson's mouth. I never thought family, the very people I sacrificed for, the ones I held closest, could turn into my deepest source of pain. I was wrong. Life has a way of stripping illusions from us when we least expect it. I raised my only daughter, Clara, with every ounce of love I had. After my husband, George, passed away far too early, I worked tirelessly to provide for her. I worked nights in a bakery, mornings as a seamstress, and weekends cleaning houses just so Clara never went without. My savings became my security blanket, not just for me, but for her and for the grandchildren I one day dreamed of spoiling. When my first grandchild, Aaron, was born, I thought he was my miracle. I cradled him in my arms and whispered promises that I'd always protect him, that I'd always be there. As he grew, I spoiled him with little gifts, birthday surprises, and special outings. I thought love would shape him into a man of kindness. But over the years I saw something unsettling. While Aaron had a smile that could charm anyone, beneath it lingered impatience, greed, and entitlement. As a boy, he would demand more toys even after being given one. As a teenager, he'd roll his eyes at chores, declaring, "That's beneath me." Clara, ever the gentle mother, brushed it off. "He'll grow out of it," she'd say. But deep down, I wondered. Then there was my granddaughter, Julia, born 3 years after Aaron. Unlike her brother, Julia was selfless, thoughtful, always checking on me without being asked. She didn't need grand gifts, just a cup of tea and time together made her happy. I often thought the two of them were night and day, though I loved them both fiercely. But nothing prepared me for the moment my heart cracked. It was an ordinary afternoon. My body, weakened by arthritis and years of wear, struggled more these days. I asked Aaron if he could help me bring in the groceries from the car. I thought it was a small, reasonable request. He didn't even look up from his phone. "Can't you do it yourself, Grandma?" he muttered. I reminded him gently. "My knees aren't what they used to be. I just need a hand." That's when he sighed, tossed his phone aside, and said it. Words sharper than any knife. "You're useless now." For a moment, time froze. The groceries in my arms grew heavier, my chest tightened, and the world around me seemed to fall silent. Useless. After everything I had done, after every sacrifice, that's how he saw me? A burden, a shell of a woman who no longer mattered? I stared at him, hoping it was a cruel joke. But his expression wasn't playful, it was annoyed, impatient, as though helping me was beneath him. I carried those words with me that night. They echoed louder than my ticking clock. How could someone I poured so much love into see me as disposable? The truth struck me hard. Aaron never valued me. He valued what I had. My house, my savings, my life insurance, all the things he thought would one day belong to him. In his eyes, I wasn't his grandmother. I was a stepping stone to wealth. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I realized the depth of betrayal. Love had been one-sided, and I had been blind. But Aaron didn't know something important. Something that had been quietly set in stone long before he ever called me useless. He didn't know that I had already changed my will. He didn't know that the inheritance he expected would never find its way into his hands. But Aaron didn't know that I had already changed my will, and none of what he expected would ever reach his hands. Families are built on love. But mine had cracks running through its foundation. People often imagine family as an unbreakable circle, strong, supportive, and protective. But circles can fracture, and sometimes, the cracks are so fine you don't notice them until the whole structure threatens to collapse. My daughter, Clara, was my pride and joy. She had her father's soft eyes and my determination, but her heart was perhaps too gentle. She raised Aaron and Julia with kindness, but also with blind forgiveness. She believed that love alone could fix flaws, that patience would polish rough edges. It was her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. Aaron grew up wrapped in that shield of excuses. Every time he snapped at someone, every time he shirked responsibility, Clara would smile softly and say, "He's just young. He'll grow out of it. But young turned into teenage years, and teenage years turned into adulthood. And still, Aaron remained the same, demanding, entitled, and blind to how much was being given to him. I remember his 17th birthday clearly. I had saved for months to buy him a brand new guitar because he said he wanted to learn music. The day I surprised him, he barely smiled. He strummed it once, muttered, "It's not the model I wanted," and left it collecting dust in the corner of his room. That same year, Julia turned 14. When I gifted her a second-hand set of paintbrushes and a small canvas, she threw her arms around me and said it was the best present she'd ever received. She painted me a portrait of daisies, the flowers her grandfather once planted in our backyard, and I still have it framed in my living room. The contrast was undeniable, but Clara always defended Aaron. "He just has different tastes," she'd say. Or, "He'll mature once he finds his passion." I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I worried that maturity would never come. Julia, on the other hand, grew into a remarkable young woman. At 25, she had a steady job as a nurse, working long hours but still making time to visit me. She never came empty-handed, not with gifts, but with warmth. A hot cup of tea, a slice of pie, her laughter filling the kitchen. She didn't need money or inheritance to motivate her. She gave me her time, her care, her heart. I often wondered if Aaron noticed the difference between them. If he realized how much Julia's sincerity shined compared to his own hollow charm. But Aaron didn't seem to care. He was the golden child in Clara's eyes, and he knew it. As my health declined, those cracks in our family grew wider. Arthritis slowed me down, and my hands, once so quick with a sewing needle, began to tremble. Julia adjusted, offering to drive me to doctor's appointments, cooking me simple meals, even organizing my medication. Aaron? He grew distant unless money was involved. He'd only show up with questions that made my stomach knot. "Grandma, how much is your house worth these days?" Or, "Do you still have that retirement account Dad mentioned?" He thought he was subtle, but I knew. Every question was coded in greed. One night, Julia stayed over because she noticed I was tired. We sat at the table, sipping tea, when Aaron burst in. His eyes darted immediately to Julia. "What are you doing here again?" he snapped. Julia calmly said, "I'm spending time with Grandma," he sneered. "You don't fool me. You're just buttering her up for the will." The words made my blood run cold. Julia's face flushed, her lips trembling with restrained anger. But she didn't argue. Instead, she simply placed her hand on mine and whispered, "Don't listen to him, Grandma." I saw it. Then, the jealousy. The bitterness in Aaron's eyes. He wasn't just greedy. He was competitive. To him, Julia's kindness wasn't genuine love, it was a threat to his future wealth. And in that moment, I knew. The inheritance wasn't just a matter of money. It was a battlefield waiting to erupt. Clara tried to play peacekeeper, as always. When I confronted her later about Aaron's behavior, she sighed, "Mom, you know Aaron. He doesn't mean what he says." But how many times had I heard that? Words matter. Words reveal what lives in the heart. Even when people pretend otherwise. Aaron's words revealed his heart was rotting with entitlement. Still, Clara's blindness left me torn. She was my only child, and though she failed to see Aaron clearly, I knew her heart was good. She was caught between protecting her son and protecting her mother, and I couldn't bring myself to blame her entirely. But Julia saw what I saw. She wasn't afraid to admit it. One evening, when she helped me fold laundry, she looked at me with steady eyes and said, "Grandma, Aaron doesn't care about you. He cares about what you have. Please don't ignore it." Her words stung because they were true. And as much as I loved Aaron, I couldn't deny it anymore. His actions spoke louder than any excuse Clara could offer. That's why, 2 years earlier, I had made a decision that would change everything. A decision Aaron would never forgive me for. I went to my lawyer, Mr. Patterson, and I rewrote my will. Julia would inherit the house, the savings, the investments, everything I had built over a lifetime of sacrifice. Clara would receive a comfortable trust fund to ensure her care, because I never wanted her to struggle. But Aaron? he would get nothing but a letter. A letter explaining why his cruelty, his arrogance, and his lack of compassion had cost him everything. It wasn't an easy choice. He was still my grandson, after all. But love without respect isn't love, it's manipulation, and I refused to reward cruelty. Aaron had no idea his imagined future was already gone. He still walked around the house with the arrogance of an heir, dropping hints about, when this place is mine, or when I get the money. He thought he was untouchable. But he was wrong. So very wrong. If he could say I was useless now, what would he say when he realized he wouldn't inherit a single possible dime? The truth was, Aaron's inheritance had already been taken from him. People assume that the most difficult part of aging is the body failing. But I learned the harder part is watching the people you love reveal who they truly are. It was that revelation, the bitter sting of truth, that drove me to Mr. Patterson's office 2 years ago. Mr. Patterson had been my family's lawyer for decades, ever since George and I first bought our home. He was a man of steady voice, clear eyes, and sharp wit, the kind of man who could sense the tremors of unease in a client before a single word was spoken. I remember sitting in his office that morning, my hands clasped in my lap, my voice low. "Mr. Patterson," I said, "I want to change my will." He looked up from his papers, raising an eyebrow. "That's a serious decision, Mrs. Whitmore. Are you certain?" Certain? My heart ached at the thought of even considering it. But then I remembered Aaron's smirk when he borrowed money without repayment. I remembered the way he spoke about my house as though it were already his. I remembered the disappointment, the disrespect, the sense of being treated as a bank account instead of a grandmother. And the certainty settled inside me like stone. "Yes," I said firmly. "I am." We went over the details together. My estate wasn't extravagant by some standards, but it was everything I had. My house, bought brick by brick with years of labor, my retirement savings, a modest investment portfolio George had started for me, and a small life insurance policy. At first, my will split everything between my 2 grandchildren, Aaron and Julia. Equal halves. It had seemed fair when they were children. But fairness changes when character reveals itself. I instructed Mr. Patterson to rewrite the will. Julia would inherit the house, because I knew she would treasure it. She had spent countless hours here with me, learning recipes in my kitchen, helping me in the garden, keeping the memories alive. She would never sell it off in a hurry, she would preserve it as a home. She would also receive the majority of my savings and investments, not out of favoritism, but because she had proven herself responsible. Julia understood the value of hard work and the importance of care. I knew she would use that money wisely, perhaps even to continue helping others through her work as a nurse. Clara, my dear daughter, would receive a trust fund. I wanted her to have stability, to know that she would be cared for even when I was no longer around. I didn't want her to depend on Aaron or anyone else. The trust would keep her comfortable for the rest of her life. And then there was Aaron. I stared at the blank space on the draft of the new will, my pen hovering in the air. My chest ached with conflict. He was my grandson. I had held him as a baby, kissed his scraped knees, cheered for him at school plays. The love I had given him was real. But love isn't meant to blind us to truth. Love without honesty is just enabling. In the end, I told Mr. Patterson the only thing Aaron would receive. A sealed letter. A letter I had written by hand, with every ounce of truth I could pour into it. In that letter, I explained everything. I told him how his entitlement and cruelty had chipped away at my heart, how his words, actions, and lack of compassion had left scars deeper than he realized. I told him Julia hadn't stolen anything from him, she had simply earned through kindness what he had squandered through selfishness. I didn't write the letter out of spite. I wrote it out of hope, small though it was. Hope that one day, maybe, he would read it and see himself clearly. That maybe, stripped of inheritance, he might finally understand the value of respect, compassion, and family. When I finished writing, my hands trembled. I sealed it in an envelope with his name on the front, and Mr. Patterson tucked it away safely with the rest of my documents. "You're sure about this?" he asked again, his tone careful. I nodded. Yes. If Aaron ever wants to understand why he got nothing, the letter will tell him. If he doesn't care enough to read it, then he's proven my point already. Mr. Patterson leaned back, folding his hands. Then it's done. Walking out of that office, I felt both heavy and relieved. Heavy because I knew the decision would one day break the fragile strings of family connection we still had. Relieved because I knew I was finally standing up for myself, for Julia, for what was right. For 2 years, I carried that secret. Every time Aaron spoke as though the house were already his, every time he made a joke about Grandma's money, I wanted to shout the truth. But I stayed silent. Part of me wanted to see his arrogance play out, to watch him build castles in the air that would one day collapse. Julia didn't know. Clara didn't know. No one did but Mr. Patterson and me. But I knew. And that knowledge gave me strength on the nights when Aaron's words cut too deep. When he told me I was useless, I reminded myself. He thought he was clever. Thought he was in control. But the truth had already outpaced him. The inheritance he coveted had slipped from his fingers long before he even realized he was holding it. And that truth? It was going to hit him harder than any cruel word he had ever thrown at me. Because people like Aaron build their identity on what they expect to gain, not on what they give. And when the expected prize is taken away, they unravel. I had seen it in his eyes before, the desperation, the entitlement, the hunger. I knew he would not take the truth gracefully. He would fight it, rage against it, perhaps even try to undo it. But what Aaron didn't understand was that I had built walls higher than his greed could climb. Mr. Patterson had assured me everything was airtight. No challenge will succeed unless there's fraud or proof of coercion, he explained. And we both know you're clear-headed and making this decision of your own free will. Free will. How ironic those words felt when discussing a will. The paper was signed. The ink was dry. The decision was final. And yet, as certain as I was, a shadow lingered in my heart. Because no matter how strong I appeared, I was still a grandmother. And part of me knew. When the day came, Aaron wouldn't just walk away. He would fight. He would lash out. And the battle would not be pretty. But Aaron still believed he was the chosen heir, and I knew he wouldn't take the truth gracefully. Aaron began circling me like a vulture. There's something unsettling about being watched not out of love, but out of expectation. That's how Aaron's presence began to feel in my home. Not like a grandson visiting his grandmother, but like a man counting the minutes until a fortune was his. When my arthritis grew worse and I relied more on Julia for errands and household chores, Aaron suddenly started showing up more often. But not with soup, not with flowers, not with laughter. He came with questions. Always questions. Grandma, do you still have that retirement account with the bank? What about your investments? How much are those worth now? Are your life insurance premiums paid up? You know those can lapse if you're not careful. He asked them casually, pretending concern, but I wasn't fooled. His eyes glistened whenever he spoke of numbers, not health. He'd glance around my house as though he were already rearranging the furniture in his mind. Once, he even ran his hand along the fireplace mantel and muttered, "When this place is mine, I'll rip out this old stone and modernize it." I was sitting right there when he said it. He didn't even flinch. Julia heard too, and her face darkened with anger. "This isn't yours, Aaron," she snapped. He smirked. "Not yet." The tension between the two of them grew with each visit. Julia couldn't hide her disgust at his behavior, and Aaron seemed to enjoy provoking her. He'd say things like, "I'll finally get some use out of this dusty old house." Or, "I can't wait to flip this place for a profit." Julia would remind him firmly, "Grandma isn't gone. Stop talking like she island." But Aaron would only laugh, as if her outrage amused him. Clara, bless her heart, tried to brush it all off. She'd scold Julia for being too harsh and tell me, "Aaron's just excited. You know how he island." But I knew. I knew too well. Excitement was one thing, greed was another. Then came the night I overheard him on the phone. I was dozing in my chair, the TV humming softly in the background, when his voice drifted down the hall. He thought I was asleep. "Yeah," I heard him say. "Once Grandma passes, I'll be set. The house, the money, everything. I won't have to worry about a thing. Julia can keep working her little nurse shifts, but I'll finally live easy." His words sliced through me like ice water. To him, my death wasn't tragedy, it was opportunity. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. I shuffled back to my chair before he caught me, and when he walked past minutes later, his face smug and carefree, I kept my silence. But inside, something shifted. The countdown to truth had begun. From that night on, I noticed his impatience growing sharper. He no longer tried to hide his greed behind charm. He pushed, prodded, hinted more openly. One afternoon, when Julia had just finished making me tea, Aaron blurted out, "Grandma, you did make me the main beneficiary, right? Julia doesn't really need anything. She's got her job. I should get the estate. That's fair." I set my teacup down, steadying my voice. "Aaron, everything is taken care of. You don't need to worry." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "That's not an answer." Julia clenched her fists, ready to fight, but I placed a ready braid, a hand on hers to keep her calm. "It's not your concern," I said gently but firmly. Aaron scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "So you're saying Julia gets more, aren't you? That's why she's here all the time. She's sucking up to you, and you're falling for it." Julia's face went pale with fury. "How dare you?" she snapped. But Aaron only smirked, that arrogant tilt of his chin making me want to scream. I tried to end the conversation, but the damage was done. Julia stormed out of the room, tears in her eyes, and Aaron followed her with mocking laughter. My heart broke as I sat there, realizing the divide between my grandchildren was growing wider with every passing day. Still, Aaron wasn't done. He started lingering in places he never used to. My study, where I kept old files and photographs. The spare room, where my safe was tucked into the closet. Once, I caught him flipping through an old shoebox of documents. When I asked what he was doing, he shrugged. "Just making sure you've got things organized, don't want anything to get lost." His voice was casual, but his hands trembled with impatience. Julia noticed too. She began keeping a closer eye on him whenever he visited. She'd make excuses to stay overnight, claiming she wanted to cook me breakfast in the morning. But I knew she was guarding me, quietly, selflessly, with the protective instinct Aaron lacked. The more Aaron pressed, the more I felt the walls closing in. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying to force my hand, that he wanted answers before my time came naturally. The weight of the secret will grew heavier. It was my shield, my safeguard, but also the powder keg waiting to explode. I knew the day would come when Aaron's patience would run dry. When he would demand more than vague reassurances. I thought I had time before that moment arrived. I was wrong. But I never imagined Aaron would try to force my hand before my time came. One evening, Aaron finally let the mask drop completely. It started like any other night. The autumn air was crisp, and Julia had just left after bringing me homemade soup. Clara had called earlier to check in, her voice soft and weary as usual. I was alone in the house, the ticking of the clock filling the silence. Then came the knock on the door. Sharp. Impatient. I opened it to find Aaron standing there. His expression tight. Jaw clenched. He didn't greet me. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He simply pushed past me into the living room. "Aaron?" I asked, startled. "What's the matter?" He paced, running his hand through his hair. "I need to talk to you, Grandma. And I need you to be honest with me." I eased into my chair, my knees aching. "I've always been honest with you." He stopped pacing and looked at me with eyes that burned not with love, not even with concern, but with hunger. "You left everything to me, right? The house, the money, all of it." My chest tightened. He wasn't even trying to hide his greed anymore. Things are taken care of, I said carefully, choosing my words. You don't need to worry. He frowned. That's not an answer. Don't play games with me, Grandma. I've been patient. I've been waiting. You know Julia doesn't deserve what you've built. She's just playing the perfect granddaughter to impress you. My heart broke at the venom in his tone. Aaron, I said softly. Julia has been nothing but kind. She helps me without asking for anything in return. You should respect that. His lip curled into a sneer. Respect her? She's nothing compared to me. I'm your first grandson. The one you spoiled. The one you always said would make you proud. And now you're letting her steal what's mine? The words stabbed deeper than he realized. For years, I had told him I believed in him, that he would grow into a man of character, but looking at him now, I saw only greed and resentment. Julia hasn't stolen anything, I said firmly. And nothing belongs to you until I say it does. That's when his temper flared. He stepped closer, towering over me, his voice rising. You're useless now. You can't even carry your own groceries. You're clinging to Julia because you don't want to admit you're weak, but when you're gone, I'm the one who should have it all. The cruelty of his words hit me like a slap. My hands trembled, but I refused to let him see me crumble. Aaron, I said, my voice steady despite the tears stinging my eyes. You will not speak to me that way. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. He stared at me, chest heaving, as though weighing whether to push harder. Then he laughed bitterly, a hollow sound that chilled me. You think you can cut me out, don't you? He spat. You think you can leave everything to Julia and I'll just accept it? No. I've put up with her smug little visits and her fake kindness long enough. You owe me, Grandma. After everything I've been promised, after everything you've given her, you owe me. I swallowed hard. The truth was on the tip of my tongue. I wanted to tell him right then and there that the will had already been changed, that his inheritance was gone, that Julia would inherit everything. But I stopped myself, not out of fear, but out of strategy. Because in that moment, I realized Aaron wasn't ready to hear the truth. Not yet. If I revealed it too soon, his rage would explode uncontrollably. I needed to protect myself and Julia until the time was right. So instead, I said quietly, Aaron, you need to leave. His eyes widened, then narrowed. You're kicking me out? After everything I've done for you? The irony nearly made me laugh. He had done nothing but take. But I didn't argue. I simply repeated, leave. For a long moment he stood there, glaring at me. Then he grabbed his jacket, muttering under his breath. At the door, he turned back, his face twisted with anger. You'll regret this, he hissed. You and Julia both. And then he was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. My hands shook as I tried to steady myself, gripping the arms of my chair. The boy I once held in my arms, the grandson I once believed in, had just revealed himself fully. His love wasn't love at all, it was possession. And when possession is denied, it turns to hatred. I sat there for hours, staring at the shadows dancing on the walls. I thought of Julia, of how much she had given me without asking for anything. I thought of Clara, still blind to her son's flaws. And I thought of Aaron, consumed by greed, circling me like a predator. The confrontation had left scars, but it had also given me clarity. Aaron wasn't just waiting for my inheritance, he was willing to fight for it, to demand it, to tear apart what little family we had left. But what I didn't realize was that he wouldn't stop there. No, Aaron's obsession with what he thought was his would drive him to take even darker steps. And the first sign of it was about to appear in a way I never expected. But I didn't know that Aaron would go snooping for answers, and uncover something he wasn't meant to see. Secrets don't stay hidden when greed is watching. After that night's confrontation, Aaron stopped pretending. He no longer wore the mask of the doting grandson. His visits were colder, sharper, and his eyes carried an intensity that made my skin crawl. He didn't come to sit with me or share a meal, he came to pry. I noticed the subtle changes first. The way my drawers seemed slightly out of place, my papers shuffled when I hadn't touched them. Once, the envelope holding my electric bill had been left open on my desk, though I remembered sealing it. Another time, a box of old photographs had been moved from the closet to the corner of the study. It didn't take long to put the pieces together. Aaron was snooping. Julia suspected it too. One evening, she found him wandering the hallway near my study when he thought no one was looking. "What are you doing in there?" she asked sharply. He smirked, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Just checking on Grandma's files. Making sure everything's in order. Someone has to, right?" Julia didn't buy his excuse for a second. She told me later, her voice tight with worry. "Grandma, he's looking for something. He's not just curious. He's hunting." I wanted to believe Aaron wouldn't cross certain lines, but the nagging in my gut told me otherwise. And I was right. One afternoon, while I napped in my chair, Aaron slipped into my study. He thought I was asleep, but years of motherhood and grandmotherhood had made me a light sleeper. I stirred when I heard the faint creak of the floorboards. Quiet as a mouse, I cracked my eyes open and saw him moving across the room. He went straight to the drawer where I kept old documents. He rifled through envelopes, muttering under his breath. His hands were restless, shaking with anticipation. Then, he froze. His fingers landed on a cream-colored envelope. My heart stopped. It was the letter. The letter I had written to him, the only piece of the will he was meant to see. I had intended for him to receive it only after I was gone, when anger could no longer reach me. But fate had other plans. Aaron pulled it out, staring at his name written in my shaky handwriting across the front. His lips curled into a greedy smile. He glanced over his shoulder, then slipped his finger under the seal and tore it open. I wanted to shout, to stop him, but I stayed silent, frozen in my chair in the next room. Something in me needed to see what he would do. He unfolded the letter and began to read. At first, his face was calm, eyes scanning quickly. Then his jaw tightened. His brow furrowed. His hands trembled as he read the words I had poured out, that his cruelty had wounded me, that his entitlement had destroyed my trust, that Julia, through her kindness, had earned what he had squandered, that he would inherit nothing, not the house, not the money, only these words, meant to open his eyes. I had written it with love, even if it didn't sound that way. I wanted him to understand that respect mattered more than blood, that compassion mattered more than entitlement. But instead of reflection, what I saw in Aaron's eyes was rage. He crumpled the letter in his fist, his face twisted with fury. "She gave it all to Julia," he whispered bitterly. "She thinks I'm nothing. After everything she spent on me, after everything I've waited for, nothing?" He slammed his fist against the desk, the sound making me flinch. "That ungrateful old woman," he hissed. "And Julia, smug little Julia. She thinks she's won." In that moment, I realized the truth. Aaron hadn't just lost an inheritance, he had lost control. And a man like Aaron, when stripped of what he believes is his, doesn't crumble. He retaliates. He stuffed the crumpled letter into his pocket, storming out of the study. I shut my eyes quickly, pretending to sleep as he passed through the living room. My heart hammered in my chest, but I stayed still, forcing myself to breathe evenly. When the front door slammed behind him, I opened my eyes and let the tears fall. He knew. He wasn't supposed to know yet. But he did. And I feared what he would do with that knowledge. That evening, Julia came over. I debated whether to tell her what had happened, but I couldn't bring myself to burden her yet. She had enough on her plate with long hospital shifts and the stress Aaron already caused. Instead, I just held her hand a little tighter when she sat beside me. But Julia wasn't blind. She noticed my trembling hands and asked softly, "Grandma, what happened?" I shook my head, forcing a weak smile. "I'm just tired, sweetheart." Deep down, though, I knew the storm had begun. Aaron wasn't the kind of man to lick his wounds quietly. He was the kind of man who, when denied, would lash out. And I was right. The next time Aaron visited, his charm was gone. He didn't smile. He didn't greet me warmly. He sat across from me, staring, his eyes dark. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he muttered. "You think you can just cut me out like that?" My heart raced, but I held his gaze. "Aaron, everything I've done with reason." His lip curled. "You'll regret this." Julia, who had come in midway through, stepped between us. "Leave," she said firmly. "Now." Aaron laughed bitterly. "Of course. Julia, the saint. Always swooping in to save Grandma. Enjoy your prize. But don't think I'm done. I don't lose. Not to you. Not to anyone." And with that, he stormed out again, leaving behind the scent of his anger, thick and suffocating. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. The inheritance was gone from his grasp, and he knew it. But instead of surrender, he would fight. He would scheme. He would find new ways to make me pay for the decision I had made. And from that day forward, Aaron plotted to get what he thought he deserved by any means necessary. Julia noticed Aaron's eyes had changed. It wasn't just me who felt it. Julia, sharp and observant as always, saw the shift in Aaron almost immediately. His visits became shorter, his patience thinner, and his words sharper. He no longer even bothered to pretend he was helping me, he was just there, circling, prowling, watching. Julia didn't like it one bit. One evening, after Aaron left the house in a fury, Julia sat across from me at the kitchen table. The lamplight softened her face, but her eyes burned with concern. "Grandma," she said slowly, "something's wrong with him. He's angrier, more desperate. It's like he knows something." I hesitated, my fingers curling around my teacup. Should I tell her about the letter he found? Should I confess that Aaron had already uncovered the truth I meant to shield her from until I was gone? But I stayed silent, not wanting to burden her. "He's just stressed," I said gently. "You know how he can be." Julia shook her head. "No, this feels different. I've seen people like him before, patients in the hospital who get that wild look when they feel like something is slipping out of their hands. It's dangerous." Her words pierced me because I knew she was right. Over the next few weeks, Julia began keeping track of Aaron's behavior, almost like a nurse documenting symptoms. She'd notice things I tried to overlook. "He stayed in the study again tonight," she whispered one evening after he stormed off. "Grandma, I think he's looking for the will." "I locked it up with Mr. Patterson," I reassured her, though my voice wavered. "But what if he finds something else? What if he tries to take something?" Julia's worry only grew when she caught him lurking around the house at odd hours. Once, she arrived unexpectedly and saw him through the front window, pacing my living room even though I wasn't home. When she confronted him, he brushed her off, saying he was checking on the place. That night, she told me bluntly, "He's not just impatient, Grandma. He's plotting." Clara, of course, refused to believe it. Whenever Julia tried to warn her mother, Clara defended Aaron. "He's just under pressure," she'd insist. "You don't know what it's like for him. Life's been hard." Julia's frustration boiled over. "Life's hard for everyone, Mom. I work 12-hour shifts and still manage to treat people with respect. That's no excuse for Aaron's behavior." But Clara turned away, unwilling to hear it. The divide in our family deepened. Julia and Clara, once close, began to argue. Whenever Aaron's name came up, I sat between them, my heart aching, wishing I could mend the rift. But how could I? The truth was a bomb waiting to explode, and no matter what I did, someone would get hurt. Aaron, meanwhile, seemed to revel in the chaos he caused. He'd smirk when Julia glared at him, knowing he was getting under her skin. He'd toss snide remarks at me, little barbs meant to wound. "Funny how some people think they're the favorite now," he muttered once as Julia walked past. Julia didn't respond, but I saw the way her fists clenched. She was holding back. For my sake. Then came the night that sealed her suspicions. Julia was staying over, sleeping in the guest room. I had gone to bed early, exhausted from a long day. Sometime in the middle of the night, Julia woke to the sound of footsteps. She thought it was me at first, maybe getting up for water. But when she peeked out into the hallway, she saw Aaron. He was standing outside my bedroom door, his hand on the knob, his face tense. Julia's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "What are you doing?" Aaron froze, then slowly turned. His expression shifted into a sly smile. "Just checking on Grandma, making sure she's all right." "In the middle of the night?" Julia asked, her voice cold. Aaron shrugged. "Can't be too careful." Julia didn't buy it for a second. She stepped forward, positioning herself between him and my door. "Go back to sleep, Aaron. Grandma doesn't need you snooping around." His smile faltered, replaced by a glare. For a moment, I thought he might push past her. But then he muttered something under his breath and walked back to the couch where he claimed he'd been napping. The next morning, Julia told me everything. "He was at your door, Grandma." "At your door. He's not just greedy anymore, he's dangerous." Her words filled me with dread. I had wanted to protect her from the full truth, but now I realized she was protecting me. Still, when I considered telling her about the letter he had found, fear held me back. If Aaron knew I was aware of his snooping, what might he do next? Julia, however, wasn't waiting for answers. She started taking small precautions. She installed a chain lock on my bedroom door without telling Aaron. She began keeping her phone close, ready to call the police if necessary. She even started a notebook, documenting every suspicious thing Aaron said or did. "He's going to slip up," she told me quietly one evening. "And when he does, I'll be ready." Her determination both comforted and terrified me. I didn't want her caught in Aaron's storm, but I also knew I couldn't stop her. She loved me too much to back down. As for Clara, she remained stubbornly blind. "You're imagining things," she told Julia. "Aaron wouldn't hurt his grandmother, he's just struggling." But Julia's instincts were sharper than Clara's denial. She saw what others refused to see. Aaron wasn't just struggling, he was unraveling. And though she tried to shield me, neither of us could stop what was coming. Because Aaron had already set his mind on one goal, and nothing, not love, not reason, not family, would stand in his way. But neither of them knew Aaron's plan was already in motion. Aaron started treating me like an obstacle in his path. There's a shift that happens when someone stops pretending. The polite words, the forced smiles, the little gestures, they vanish. All that's left is raw intent. With Aaron, that intent was clear. I was in his way. The weeks after Julia caught him outside my bedroom door were some of the most unsettling of my life. Aaron no longer even tried to mask his impatience. His tone was sharp, his words calculated, and his visits felt less like family gatherings and more like interrogations. He'd drop comments that chilled me to the bone. "You know, Grandma, it'd be easier if you just moved into one of those assisted living places. You'd be comfortable, and I could take care of things here. Or, this house is too big for you now. Don't you think it's time someone else managed it?" Each time I'd deflect with vague reassurances, but Julia wasn't having it. She'd step in, her voice firm and unwavering. "She's fine here, Aaron. She doesn't need you managing anything." Aaron would sneer, his eyes glinting with frustration. "Of course you'd say that. You're just trying to keep her under your thumb." Julia stood her ground, but I could see the toll it was taking. Her jaw would tighten, her hands ball into fists. She wanted to scream at him, but she knew he thrived on conflict. Then came the day he overstepped further. He paid a visit to Mr. Patterson. I didn't know about it until Mr. Patterson himself called me. His voice was steady but tinged with concern. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "your grandson came by my office today. He demanded to see a copy of your will." My heart dropped. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that it's confidential, and he has no right to view it while you're alive." He wasn't pleased. He implied you were being manipulated, that you weren't in your right mind. I closed my eyes, a shiver running down my spine. Aaron was pushing harder than ever. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Patterson continued. I've seen cases like this before. Be cautious. When people believe they're entitled to something, they can become dangerous. Dangerous. The word lingered in my mind long after the call ended. Julia's suspicions were right. Aaron wasn't just greedy anymore, he was desperate. His behavior confirmed it. He started showing up unannounced, sometimes late at night, pounding on the door until Julia opened it. He'd stride in without asking, scanning the rooms as though searching for hidden treasure. One evening, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Grandma, you should just tell me what's in the will. It'd make things easier for everyone." I forced a smile. "It's not something you need to worry about, Aaron. Everything is taken care of." His expression hardened. "You think you're clever. You think you can play games with me. But I always win." Julia stepped forward, her voice like steel. "Get out." For a moment I thought he might strike her. His face twisted, fists clenched, but instead, he laughed. A low, unsettling laugh that made my skin crawl. "Fine," he said, grabbing his jacket. "But you'll regret this." He's not just after money anymore, he wants control. And he's going to keep pushing until something breaks. Her words proved true sooner than I expected. The very next week, Aaron began spreading lies. He told Clara that Julia was manipulating me, convincing me to change the will in her favor. He painted himself as the victim, the poor grandson being pushed out by a scheming sister. Clara, torn as ever, didn't know what to believe. She called me in tears, asking, "Mom, is it true? Did Julia make you change things?" I reassured her gently. "No, Clara. Julia hasn't asked for anything. She's only ever given." But I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Aaron had planted the seed of doubt, and it was growing. When Julia found out, she was furious. "He's turning Mom against me now? That's low, even for him." But I wasn't surprised. Aaron had always believed that if he couldn't get something honestly, he could twist the story until it bent in his favor. Then came the most chilling moment yet. One night, Julia and I were in the living room when we heard the sound of glass shattering in the back of the house. Julia grabbed her phone, ready to call the police. But before she could, Aaron stumbled into the room. His face was flushed, his breath heavy. "Forgot my key," he muttered, though we both knew it was a lie. Julia stepped forward, her voice shaking with controlled anger. "You broke in. You could have scared Grandma half to death." Aaron's smirk sent a shiver down my spine. "Relax. This will all be mine soon enough. Why should it matter how I get in?" Julia's voice rose. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Aaron leaned closer to her, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, Julia? You think just because she dotes on you, you'll come out on top? You don't know what I'm capable of." Julia didn't back down. "Try me." For a long, tense moment, the two of them stood inches apart, the air crackling with hostility. Then Aaron chuckled, backing away. "Both of you will see." When he finally left, Julia locked every door and window, her hands trembling. She turned to me, her eyes wet. "Grandma, he's dangerous. I'm scared for you." I pulled her into a hug, though my own body shook. "I know, sweetheart. I know." But even as I held her, I felt the weight of inevitability. Aaron wasn't just waiting anymore. He was playing a dangerous game, one where the stakes weren't just money, but safety. And I feared the next move he made would push us all past the point of no return. And then, one night, the danger revealed itself in the most shocking way. I woke to the sound of footsteps in my study. It was a quiet night, or at least it was supposed to be. Julia had insisted on staying over again, claiming she didn't like the thought of me being alone with Aaron prowling around more and more. I had gone to bed early, my body tired, my mind restless. But in the middle of the night, a sound pierced the silence, a faint creak, the unmistakable shuffle of feet on wood. At first, I thought it was Julia, maybe getting a glass of water. But the footsteps didn't head toward the kitchen. They moved toward the study. My heart pounded in my chest. I forced myself to sit up, every joint aching as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. I grabbed my cane and moved slowly, quietly, down the hall. The door to the study was cracked open, light spilling out from the small desk lamp. I edged closer, my breath shallow. And there he was, Aaron. He was hunched over my desk, papers scattered everywhere, his face twisted with frustration, his hands rifled through envelopes, drawers yanked open, contents spilled onto the floor. He wasn't even careful anymore. He was frantic, desperate, like a man searching for air underwater. I gasped softly, and his head whipped up. His eyes locked on mine, dark and wild. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he sneered. "Looking for something, Aaron?" I asked, my voice trembling. He slammed the drawer shut. "Don't play dumb, Grandma. I know you've hidden it. The will. Where is it?" My grip tightened on the cane. "That's none of your concern." His laugh was sharp, bitter. "None of my concern? You're my grandmother. This house, this money, it's supposed to be mine. And you think you can just hand it all over to Julia? To her?" Before I could answer, Julia's voice rang out. "What's going on?" She appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening as she took in the scene, the scattered papers, Aaron's furious face, my trembling hands. In an instant, she understood. "You're unbelievable," Julia spat, stepping into the room. "Snooping through Grandma's things in the middle of the night? Have you no shame?" Aaron's eyes darted between us, his lips curling into a twisted smile. "Of course you'd show up, Julia. Always the hero, always the favorite. You think you've won, don't you?" That letter was just the beginning. My blood ran cold. He was admitting it openly now. He had read the letter. Julia stiffened. "What letter?" she asked, turning to me. I swallowed hard. I hadn't wanted her to find out this way, but the truth was already spilling out. "The letter I wrote for him," I whispered. "The one he wasn't supposed to read until after I was gone." Julia's face paled as the realization sank in. She turned back to Aaron, fury flashing in her eyes. "You broke into her study, you stole from her, and now you're throwing a tantrum because you didn't get what you wanted." Aaron's mask cracked, rage flooding through. "She betrayed me. Everything she has, everything should be mine. I've waited my whole life for it, and now she wants to give it to you? You don't deserve it, Julia. You never did." Julia stepped closer, her voice shaking but strong. "I don't care about the money, Aaron. I care about her. That's the difference between us, and that's why she made her choice." The words hit him like a slap. His face twisted, veins bulging in his neck. He slammed his fist on the desk, making me flinch. "Shut up!" he roared. "You think you're better than me? You think just because you play nurse and bring her tea, you're entitled to everything?" Julia didn't back down. "No, Aaron, I don't think I'm better. But I do know this: Grandma's love isn't something you earn with greed, it's something you earn with respect. And you've shown her none." For a moment, the room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Then Aaron's voice dropped low, dangerous. "You'll regret this, both of you." He shoved past Julia, storming down the hall. The front door slammed so hard the walls shook. I sank into the chair, my chest heaving, my hands trembling. Julia rushed to me, kneeling beside me, her eyes filled with worry. "Are you okay, Grandma?" I nodded weakly, though fear still pulsed through my veins. "He knows, Julia. He knows everything now." She took my hand in hers, squeezing tightly. "Then we'll be ready. He's not going to get away with this." Down, I knew this was just the beginning. Aaron had crossed a line tonight, and there was no going back. The house no longer felt safe. The shadows seemed thicker, the silence more threatening. Every creak of the floor made me jump. Every knock at the door sent my heart racing. I thought back to Mr. Patterson's warning: people who believe they're entitled can become dangerous. And Aaron had just proven him right. As I drifted to sleep that night, my mind replayed his words. "You'll regret this." It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. And true to his word, Aaron's next move would prove far more sinister than anything we had seen before. And true to his threat, Aaron's next move would change everything. Aaron tried to play the law against me. After the night he ransacked my study, I thought Aaron might cool off, lick his wounds, and bide his time. But Aaron wasn't the type to retreat quietly. No. His pride wouldn't allow it. When one door closed, he searched for another way in. And the way he chose was far more cunning and far more dangerous than I had ever anticipated. It started with a knock on the door a week later. Julia answered, only to find a man in a crisp suit standing there with an envelope in hand. His words made Julia's face blanch. "Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore is being served." I took the papers with trembling hands, my eyes scanning the bold letters. Petition for guardianship. Aaron was trying to prove I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. If he succeeded, the court would hand him control of everything: my finances, my house, my medical decisions. He wasn't waiting for me to die anymore. He was trying to take my life while I was still breathing. Julia's face turned red with fury. "He's unbelievable," she hissed. "He can't do this." But legally, he could try. And he was trying. That very night, Clara came over in tears. She had spoken to Aaron, and he had filled her head with poisonous lies. "Mom," she said, wringing her hands, "he says Julia's been manipulating you. He says you're not thinking clearly, that she's trying to cut him out of the will. He's worried about you." I stared at her, my heart aching. "Clara, do you really believe that? Do you really think I don't know my own mind?" Her lip trembled. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Julia stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Believe what you see, Mom. Grandma's fine. Aaron's just angry he isn't getting his way." But Clara looked torn, her eyes darting between us. Aaron had planted seeds of doubt, and they were sprouting quickly. The following week, we were summoned to court. I sat in the courtroom, my hands folded tightly in my lap, my heart pounding as Aaron strutted in wearing a tailored suit. He looked smug, confident, like a man already tasting victory. Clara sat beside him, her eyes downcast. Julia and Mr. Patterson were by my side, their presence steadying me. When the judge entered, the room hushed. Aaron's lawyer began his case, painting me as a frail, confused old woman unable to manage her own affairs. He claimed I was vulnerable to manipulation, that Julia had inserted herself into my life to gain control. His words twisted the truth so sharply it felt like knives cutting into me. I glanced at Clara, hoping she'd meet my eyes, but she stared at the floor, her face pale. Then it was Mr. Patterson's turn. He stood tall, his voice clear. "Your Honor, Mrs. Whitmore is of sound mind. She has made deliberate, thoughtful choices regarding her estate. She continues to live independently with minimal assistance. There is no evidence, none, that she is incapable of managing her affairs." Julia was then called to the stand. She spoke calmly, though her voice trembled at times. "I don't want her money," she said firmly. "I just want my grandmother safe and cared for. Aaron is the one obsessed with inheritance, not me." Aaron snorted loudly, earning a warning glance from the judge. Finally, I was called to testify. My heart pounded as I rose to my feet, cane in hand, but when I looked at Aaron's smug face, something inside me steadied. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge asked gently, "do you understand why you're here today?" "Yes," I said clearly. "I am here because my grandson believes he is entitled to my estate, and because I refuse to indulge his greed, he is trying to declare me unfit." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I may be old. My knees may ache. My hands may tremble. But my mind is strong. Strong enough to see the truth. And the truth is, Aaron does not care about me. He cares about what I have. That is why I changed my will. That is why he is angry. But anger does not make him right. Aaron's face darkened, his jaw tightening. He leaned forward, whispering furiously to his lawyer, but the judge silenced him with a firm knock of the gavel. After deliberating briefly, the judge returned with a decision. "There is no evidence, Mrs. Whitmore is incapable of handling her affairs. This petition is denied." Furthermore, Mr. Whitmore, I strongly advise you to reconsider your actions. The court does not take kindly to attempts at exploiting the elderly. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Julia gripped my hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mr. Patterson gave me a small nod of victory. But Aaron's face was a storm. His smugness had vanished, replaced by a fury so intense it sent shivers through me. He stormed out of the courtroom, Clara trailing behind him, torn between loyalty to her son and the truth staring her in the face. Outside, Julia hugged me tightly. It's over, she whispered. But I shook my head. No, sweetheart, it's not over. We've only won the first battle. Aaron isn't finished, not by a long shot. I could feel it in my bones. Aaron wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat gracefully. He was the kind of man who, when the law failed him, would turn to darker methods. But Aaron wasn't done yet. He still had one final card to play. Desperation makes people dangerous. The courtroom defeat should have ended things. The judge's words had been clear, the ruling final. Any reasonable man would have accepted it, even if begrudgingly. But Aaron wasn't reasonable. Aaron was pride-wounded and greed denied, and that combination created something volatile, something capable of anything. The weeks following the trial were the darkest yet. Aaron became relentless. He called at all hours, sometimes leaving voicemails dripping with venom. You think you've beaten me? You haven't seen anything yet. Other times he'd hang up without speaking, letting the silence itself feel like a threat. Julia begged me to change my phone number, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Some foolish part of me still hoped I could reach him. That maybe, somewhere deep inside, the boy I once loved was still there. But with each passing day, that hope grew smaller. One evening, Julia came home from her shift to find Aaron leaning against my front gate, arms crossed, smirking. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, stepping between him and the house. He shrugged casually. "Just making sure Grandma's still alive." Julia's jaw tightened. "You're not welcome here, Aaron." His eyes narrowed. "You think you've won, don't you? You think because she favors you, you're the golden child now. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." Julia held her ground, but later that night, she admitted to me, her hands trembling, "Grandma, I don't think he's just angry anymore. I think he's dangerous." I couldn't deny it. I saw it too. The way his eyes lingered a little too long, the sharpness of his words, the menace in his laughter, it was all building toward something. Clara, however, still clung to denial. When I called her, my voice quivering, she sighed. "Mom, you're overreacting. Aaron's upset, yes, but he wouldn't hurt you. He's just lost." "Lost?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "He's not lost, Clara. He's gone." But she didn't believe me. Or maybe she didn't want to. Then came the night he pounded on my door. It was late, past midnight, when the thunderous banging jolted me awake. Julia was already out of her room, rushing to the door before I could even get up. "Who is it?" she demanded. Aaron's voice roared from outside. "Open the door, Julia, now." "Go home," Julia shouted. "You're not coming in." The pounding grew louder, the wood rattling beneath his fists. "Don't you dare lock me out of my own house. This will be mine, and you can't stop it." I stood in the hallway, my knees trembling, my cane shaking in my hand. Julia pressed her back against the door, holding it shut as if sheer will could keep him out. "Leave, Aaron," she screamed, "or I'll call the police." There was silence. Then a low, menacing chuckle. "You'll regret this, old woman," he growled through the door, his words like acid. "Both of you will regret this." And then silence again. We stood there for several minutes, hearts pounding, afraid to move. Finally, Julia peeked through the window. He was gone. But the air felt heavy, charged, as though his presence still lingered. That night, Julia convinced me to let her install security cameras around the house. "We can't keep living like this," she insisted. "We need proof if he tries anything again." I agreed, though every hammer strike of the installation reminded me how far we had fallen. Once, my home had been a sanctuary. Now, It was a fortress against my own grandson. The stress wore on me. My illness worsened, my body weakening under the constant fear. Julia tried to shield me, but I saw the exhaustion in her eyes too. She was carrying the weight of protecting me while still working grueling shifts at the hospital. Clara visited less, torn between her loyalty to me and her son. When she did come, she looked weary, her words soft. "Mom, maybe if you just talk to him." I shook my head firmly. "There's nothing left to say, Clara. He's made his choice." Tears filled her eyes. "He's still my son. And he's still my grandson," I whispered. But love doesn't excuse cruelty. It was the last real conversation we had about Aaron before the end came. The final straw happened on a rainy evening. Julia and I were sitting in the living room, the sound of thunder rumbling outside, when we heard a noise near the back window. Julia rushed to check the camera feed on her phone. There he was, Aaron, standing in the rain, staring straight into the lens, his face twisted in a smile that sent chills down my spine. He didn't break in that night. He didn't need to. The message was clear. I'm still here. I'm watching. And I'm not finished. After that, I knew my time was short, not just because of my illness, but because my heart couldn't bear much more. I was tired. So very tired. And then, not long after, my body gave out. When Julia found me one morning, she wept beside me, clutching my hand, whispering how much she loved me. I slipped away peacefully, knowing she would carry my memory forward, but also knowing the storm wasn't over. Because death doesn't silence greed. If anything, it fuels it. And then came the day of my funeral, where the final truth would be revealed. Death has a way of exposing people's true colors. I may not have been there in body, but I know what happened that day. Funerals strip away the polite masks people wear. They reveal who truly mourns and who simply waits for their reward. And at my funeral, those truths unfolded like a cruel play on stage. The church was filled with family, neighbors, and old friends. Julia stood near the front, her hand resting on Clara's shoulder. Clara looked weary, her eyes swollen from tears. Despite all the conflict, she still loved her son and her mother deeply, but her heart was torn between grief and shame. And then there was Aaron. He arrived late, dressed in an expensive black suit that looked more like a costume than a gesture of respect. His hair was slicked back, his watch gleaming. He wore no grief on his face. Instead, his lips curved in the faintest of smirks, as though the funeral was nothing more than a formality before his payday. Guests whispered as he walked down the aisle, some exchanging uneasy glances. They had heard the rumors. His behavior had not gone unnoticed in recent months. Still, Aaron held his head high, pretending to be the grieving grandson. The service itself was beautiful. Julia had arranged everything: soft music, fresh flowers, a eulogy that spoke not of wealth or possessions, but of love, sacrifice, and resilience. People wept as they remembered me, not for what I owned but for who I had been. Aaron barely listened. He shifted in his seat, tapping his fingers impatiently on the pew. Julia noticed, her jaw tightening, but she didn't confront him. She knew what was coming after the service. When the final hymn ended and the guests slowly filed out, Mr. Patterson gathered the family in a side room of the church. The air grew heavy with anticipation. Aaron leaned back in his chair, his hands folded smugly in his lap. Julia sat beside Clara, holding her hand. Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase, his expression solemn. "Mrs. Whitmore left very clear instructions regarding her estate," he began. "Today, I will read her final will." Aaron's smirk widened, his foot tapping eagerly against the floor. He was so sure of himself, so convinced that this was his victory at last. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and began to read. "To my beloved daughter Clara, I leave a trust fund to ensure she will always be cared for, no matter what life may bring. To my granddaughter Julia, I leave my home, my savings, and all investments, for she has given me love and care beyond measure. To my grandson Aaron." Aaron leaned forward, eyes shining. This was the moment he had waited for his entire life. I leave nothing. The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. Gasps rippled through the room. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Julia squeezed her hand tightly, bracing her. Aaron froze, his smirk shattering. "What?" he hissed. Mr. Patterson continued calmly, though his voice carried weight. "To my grandson Aaron, I leave only a letter, in which I explain my decision. He will find it among the documents already in his possession." Aaron shot to his feet, his chair screeching against the floor. "This is a joke!" he shouted. "Tell me this is a joke!" But Mr. Patterson only shook his head. "It is no joke, Mr. Whitmore. Your grandmother's decision was deliberate, thoughtful, and legally binding." Aaron's face turned red, his fists clenching at his sides. "She can't do this to me. I'm her grandson. I'm the rightful heir." Julia stood, her voice steady despite the chaos. "No, Aaron. You were never entitled to anything. Grandma gave her love freely, but you never gave it back. That's why you lost." "Shut up!" Aaron roared, pointing at her. "You manipulated her! You poisoned her against me!" Tears filled Clara's eyes as she finally looked at her son. Really looked at him, without the haze of denial. She saw the greed, the rage, the entitlement blazing in his expression. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Aaron, how could you?" But Aaron ignored her, too consumed by his fury. He turned to Mr. Patterson, slamming his fist on the table. "I'll contest it. I'll take this to court. I'll prove she was manipulated." Mr. Patterson's eyes narrowed. "Your grandmother anticipated that possibility. She included a no contest clause. If you attempt to challenge this will, you forfeit even the smallest consideration you may have hoped for. Legally, you have nothing to gain." The room fell silent. Aaron's chest heaved, his breath ragged. He looked around wildly, as though searching for someone to back him up. But no one did. Not even Clara. Finally, his rage erupted. "This is all your fault," he shouted at Julia, his voice echoing through the small room. "You've ruined everything!" Julia stood tall, her gaze unflinching. "No. Aaron, you ruined it yourself." Gasps rose again as Aaron grabbed the edge of the table, flipping over a stack of papers in his fury. Guests who lingered in the hallway peered in, whispers spreading like wildfire. In an instant, whatever image of respectability Aaron had clung to crumbled. He was exposed, laid bare for everyone to see, a greedy man-child who had lost everything. Clara sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. "Aaron, please stop," she begged. But he ignored her, storming out of the room, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls rattled. The silence he left behind was deafening. Mr. Patterson calmly gathered his papers, his voice steady. "Your grandmother was clear in her wishes. Julia, the estate is yours. Clara, the trust is already secured. Aaron," he paused, sighing. "Aaron has nothing." Julia nodded, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. Clara buried her face in her hands, torn between grief for her mother and heartbreak for the son she could no longer defend. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagine Julia held Clara, comforting her despite everything. Because that's who Julia was. Compassionate, steady, strong, the granddaughter who had earned my legacy. And Aaron? He walked out of that church with nothing but rage. But Aaron wasn't finished, he erupted in front of everyone. When masks fall, they shatter. Aaron's storm didn't end when he left that side room at the church. No, it spilled over into the funeral hall itself, where mourners still lingered, speaking softly, paying their respects. They hadn't expected to witness a spectacle, but Aaron gave them one they'd never forget. He burst into the main hall, his face red with fury, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. Conversations died instantly. All eyes turned toward him. Julia followed close behind, her face pale but determined. "Do you all see this?" Aaron shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "My grandmother cut me out of her will. After everything I did for her, she gave it all to Julia." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests exchanged uneasy glances, others looked away, embarrassed for him. But Aaron wasn't embarrassed. He was too consumed by anger to feel shame. "She was manipulated," he bellowed, pointing an accusing finger at Julia. "This snake here tricked her into it. She played the perfect granddaughter, but it was all an act so she could steal everything from me." Julia stood tall, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "That's not true, and you know it. Grandma made her decision because of your behavior. You drove her to it, Aaron." "Liar," he spat. "You turned her against me. You poisoned her." Clara stepped into the room then, her eyes red from tears. "Aaron, stop," she begged. "Please, you're making it worse." He spun on her, his expression twisting. "Making it worse? You're my mother. You should be on my side. Instead, you sit there crying for her while I'm left with nothing." Clara's voice broke as she whispered, "Because you brought this on yourself." The words seemed to strike him harder than a slap. For the first time, Aaron faltered, his eyes widening in disbelief. You're against me too?" But before Clara could answer, Mr. Patterson stepped forward, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "Aaron, enough. Your grandmother anticipated this behavior. The will is airtight. If you contest it, you lose even the letter she left you. Legally, you are finished." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room was on Aaron, watching, waiting to see what he would do, and then he snapped. He kicked over a chair, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He slammed his fists on a table of flowers, sending petals scattering across the floor. "This isn't fair," he roared. "She owed me. Everything she had should have been mine." The murmurs among the guests grew louder, disgust mixing with shock. Some shook their heads, others whispered words like selfish and disgraceful. Julia stepped forward, her voice sharp as steel. "Listen to yourself, Aaron. You're not mourning Grandma. You're not even pretending anymore. All you care about is money. That's why she made the choice she did." His face twisted, spittle flying as he screamed, "Shut your mouth, you don't deserve any of it." And then, in a move that shocked everyone, he lunged toward Julia. Several guests gasped, some even rose to their feet, but Julia didn't flinch. She held her ground, staring him down with unshakable resolve. At the last moment, two men, family friends who had known me for decades, stepped in, grabbing Aaron by the arms and holding him back. "Get your hands off me!" Aaron yelled, thrashing wildly. But Julia's calm voice cut through his fury. "This is who you are, Aaron. Not the golden boy, not the heir. Just a greedy, angry man who threw away the love of his family." The words hit harder than any blow. Aaron's struggles slowed, his breathing ragged, his face twisted with defeat. Finally, the men released him, and he stumbled back, glaring at Julia with eyes full of hatred. "You'll pay for this," he hissed. "One day, you'll pay." But no one believed him anymore. Not after what they had seen. Clara turned away from him, tears streaming down her face. "I can't defend you anymore," she whispered. "Not after this." Her rejection broke him more than the will ever had. He staggered back, his confidence crumbling, his arrogance shattered. For the first time, he looked small. Slowly, the guests began to turn away, resuming their conversations in hushed tones, ignoring him as though he were invisible. And in a way, he was. His reputation, his dignity, his place in the family, it was all gone. Aaron stumbled toward the doors, his shoulders slumped, his steps heavy. When he reached the threshold, he turned one last time, his eyes blazing with bitterness. But no one was watching anymore. He was alone. The boy I once cradled, the grandson I once believed in, had destroyed himself with his own hands. Not with a lack of opportunity, but with a lack of love. As he disappeared into the daylight, Julia wrapped an arm around Clara, who sobbed into her shoulder. Despite everything, Julia comforted her mother, whispering that things would be all right. That was the kind of woman Julia was. Strong, compassionate, forgiving even when she had every right to turn bitter. And Aaron? He left with nothing. No inheritance, no support, no family. Just the hollow echo of his own downfall. And in that moment, Aaron realized he had lost more than money, he had lost his family forever. Legacies are not built on wealth, but on love. If you're hearing this story, it means my time has passed. I left this world with a heart heavy from betrayal, but also full of gratitude for the love I was given in return. Death does not silence the truth, it amplifies it. And the truth is this: what we leave behind is not measured in money, but in the love we sow in others' hearts. I know Julia cried for me. I know she sat in my empty living room, clutching the quilt I made for her when she was a little girl, remembering the warmth of our tea nights, the laughter in the garden, the quiet moments where nothing needed to be said. I know Clara wept too, finally, seeing through the fog of denial that had blinded her for so long. She realized too late that protecting Aaron from consequences had not saved him, it had destroyed him. And Aaron, my poor lost grandson, he left my funeral with nothing but rage echoing in his chest. Not because I had abandoned him, no, I had loved him fiercely until the very end, but because he had abandoned himself. He had traded love for greed, respect for entitlement. He had gambled with his family and lost everything. My will was not punishment, it was a lesson. A final attempt to make him see that wealth is nothing when it comes at the cost of compassion. I don't know if he'll ever understand it. Perhaps one day, when his pride has cooled and the silence of loneliness surrounds him, he'll take out that crumpled letter and read it again. And maybe then, the words will finally pierce his heart. But Julia understood the lesson all along. She never asked for anything, never demanded, never assumed. She gave freely, out of love, not obligation. And that is why she was entrusted with everything I had. Not because she wanted it, but because she deserved it. I can see her now, standing on the porch of my old house, looking out over the garden. The daisies George once planted still bloom every spring, their faces turned toward the Sunday. Julia tends to them, watering them carefully, smiling softly at the memory of the man who loved me and the legacy we built together. She walks through the halls of my home, not as an owner flaunting wealth, but as a guardian preserving memories. She keeps the photo albums on the shelves, the quilts on the beds, the clock ticking in the living room. She doesn't change everything, she honors what was. Clara visits often. She and Julia are closer now than they've ever been. Grief has a way of mending broken bonds, and together they share stories of me, some funny, some sad, all real. Clara regrets the years she spent shielding Aaron, but Julia never throws it in her face. Instead, she holds her hand and says, "We can't change the past, but we can learn from it." That is Julia's gift, forgiveness. And Aaron? I do not know where he is now. Perhaps he is drifting from job to job, friend to friend, never staying long enough for people to see the cracks beneath his charm. Perhaps he is sitting alone in a dim apartment, wondering why the world is so cruel, never realizing it was his own cruelty that built his prison. Or perhaps, someday, he will look in the mirror and finally see what I saw: the boy, who had every chance but chose bitterness instead of love. Wherever he is, I pray for him. Because despite everything, he is still my grandson. And love, even when betrayed, leaves behind traces that time cannot erase. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: money is fleeting. Houses crumble, investments vanish, fortunes shift. But kindness endures. It echoes in the hearts of those we touch, long after we are gone. Julia will carry my memory not because of what I left her, but because of how I loved her, and how she loved me in return. In the end, Aaron was wrong. I was never useless. Even in my final years, when my body weakened, I had value. Because love never becomes useless. Compassion never becomes useless. Respect never becomes useless. And that is the true inheritance we leave behind. Julia knows this. She has promised to use what I left her wisely, not just for herself, but to help others. She wants to start a small scholarship in my name for young nurses, to honor both her career and the sacrifices I made. She wants to volunteer at community kitchens on weekends, because she remembers how I once baked bread for neighbors during hard winters. She wants to build a life not defined by wealth, but by generosity. That is my legacy. Not the house, not the money, not the will, but Julia's heart. As for Aaron, the inheritance skipped him. Yes. But what he truly lost was far greater than money. He lost the love of his family. He lost the respect of his community, and most of all, he lost the chance to carry forward a legacy of kindness. And so, my story closes not with bitterness, but with peace. Because though betrayal scarred me, love healed me. Julia's love, Clara's eventual clarity, and even the faint hope that, someday, Aaron might understand. Because in the end, the greatest inheritance we leave behind is love, not money.